Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our March AGU GeoHealth Early Career webinar. We're really excited to have you with us today and to share some information in this professional development webinar for tips and tricks for convening an AGU session. So hope you're in the right place. We've got a great group of folks here who will share their experience and expertise really in proposing and hosting and coordinating these fall sessions and all the great work that goes on behind that. So I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items before we dive in. And so we'll start with a presentation by Dr. Morgan Gorris, who's been with the Fall Meetings Committee for the GeoHealth group and has hosted a lot of her own sessions as well. And for our Zoom call, we do have audio and video turned off by default, and we will be recording the session. So as we're focused on early career development, we do really want to make sure that this information is available to folks who might not be able to join us today at this time and hour. So we will record this and are looking at how we can put that up on AGU's website to share with you and others again in the future as well. So just a note, turn off your camera if you don't want that to be included, and same for comments, those will be recorded. For questions, we like to coordinate questions. The AGU GeoHealth Early Career Committee does a lot of coordinating on the back end. So please ask your questions in this session as they come up to the Ask Questions here. Zoom person, so if you go to the chat, you can specify who to ask or who to contact. And if you ask, go to the Ask Questions here, then we'll have folks in the back end actually coordinating and grouping those questions together. And hopefully we'll be able to have a really great discussion towards the end. So without much further, I'd like to hand it over to Morgan to kick us off on how to convene an AGU session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Franziska. And I am pulling up my screen now. And okay, we should be good. Does that look good, Franziska?
Yeah, that looks great, Morgan.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you all for joining today. As somebody who has just, recently started submitting AGU session proposals myself, I know that this task can be almost a little daunting the first time you go through it because, you show up to this AGU meeting, there's so many people there, there's a lot going on. And proposing a session and getting involved with the AGU meeting like this is just kind of one more way to ground yourself in the meeting and make some meaningful connections at AGU Fall Meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into kind of the process behind submitting a session proposal, and then pick apart the individual steps that you need to take to submit a session proposal, and then what you actually do at the fall meeting as a convener of your session. Okay, so an AGU session is different than submitting an AGU scientific abstract. An AGU session is actually like the collection of scientific research on a certain topic of interest that people then can submit their scientific abstract to. So if you've submitted an abstract before, which typically happens around late July, you go into the system, the AGU system, and you look through all the different sessions and find one that is related to your topic, and that's where you submit your scientific abstract to. But now, currently, we're soliciting proposals for AGU sessions. So those sessions that you would be submitting your abstracts to come later this year. So session abstracts are due April 14th. And how the timeline plays out from submitting the sessions to fall meeting is diagrammed here on our bottom arrow. So sessions are due April 14th. Then GeoHealth as a committee kind of works to merge certain sessions if there's a lot of interest in one particular topic, like last year it was COVID-19. We get all the sessions ready in place to open up scientific abstracts for submitting in mid-June. Abstracts come due the beginning of August this year. And then conveners, so that would be the individuals that submit an AGU session, schedule their session, and that will kind of dive into more details later. Then GeoHealth as a committee, we actually schedule the sessions throughout the day. So we pick, what topic is presented on what day and what order the different topics are presented. The whole program, both the sessions and the abstracts, is released in early October. And then the fall meeting, we know, comes around in early December. So if you're interested in submitting a session, this is a great way to actually kind of choose what we talk about at the fall meeting. So when you go to submit a session, I recommend choosing a topic that you'd like to discuss and see talked about at AGU Fall Meeting. So if you are someone who studies infectious diseases and you know that you want to network with people studying other infectious diseases and want to learn more about that, for example, that would be a great topic for you to submit a session proposal to. So how you actually go submitting a session is you choose the topic, number one. Number two is you find a few colleagues to support you in the various roles that folks need to take in the session submission process. You then actually submit your session online. That's the thing that's due April 14th. And then if the GeoHealth committee accepts your session, there's certain duties that the session conveners take throughout the planning of the fall meeting. So you deal with potential session merges. Say if we have 5 different session abstracts for infectious diseases, we're going to try to combine those so that we have a coherent structure to them. You also identify which individuals have a oral versus poster presentation if your session is allotted a oral slot. And you do things like order the presentations. So you can, decide maybe if you aren't looking at infectious diseases and you have 5 people speaking about mosquitoes and 3 people about ticks, you make your session coherent in a way that will support discussion the best. Okay, I'm going to pick apart kind of those 4 steps a little bit further here. So step number 1 is to select a topic of interest. So again, this is really, what do you want to make sure is covered at AGU Fall Meeting 2021? If you went to AGU Fall Meeting 2020 and you were a little bummed out that there wasn't a session on something in particular, this is your opportunity to put in a call for that session. Frequently, as a early career scientist, because we, are specializing in one area in particular, this aligns with what we also want to present on. So for example, I do look at infectious diseases, and so my first session proposal was on infectious diseases. And that was just a great way to kind of get to know people and network with others in that area. Another way you can get ideas for selecting a topic of interest is to look at what others have submitted, both to previous AGU fall meetings, and currently you can go in, you can go in and see what other people have submitted for sessions. So if there are 5 infectious disease submissions, then it might make sense to choose something that's just a little bit different or kind of captures a different audience, so that you're supporting, the success of your session, and you'll get people that submit scientific abstracts to your session. And as someone who is kind of a part of the session selection process and accepting all of them, I'll say there's no advantage to submitting your session first or last. So if you do want to propose an infectious disease submission, if you put it in right away, or if you put it in on April 14th, it doesn't matter. You still have just as equal of a chance of people submitting your abstracts to your session as is. Okay, for step number 2, after you pick the topic that you want to submit a session on, you're going to choose a format for your session. So traditionally, in previous years, it's been run in a different way because AGU has now turned into a virtual or hybrid meeting. This year in particular, AGU is moving forward with a hybrid meeting approach where they envision some people to actually be on site in New Orleans, they're presenting, and then some people virtually attending the meeting. And they really want to support both of those formats this year if possible. AGU is still working on solidifying this approach. Of course, since COVID is still a threat, we're going to have to do a little playing by ear this year. But this hybrid approach does just tweak how the formats are selected this year for sessions. So the information that I'm going to share with you is our best guess as of today. But there are several different types of sessions you can submit. Typically, when you think of a different session, if you've been at the fall meetings before, you have the traditional oral sessions, and then you have poster sessions, and then there's kind of a suite of special session types. And we're going to largely follow this format, whether it's a hybrid or virtual meeting this year. So for oral presentations, either in person or virtually, this is going to be a 15-minute pre-recorded talk with about a 3 to 4 minute live overview talk on presentation day live. And all of the talks of the session will be followed by a 20 to 30 minute discussion period. The second possible format that your session can take is a poster session. In person, what this is most likely going to look like is your poster is hung up for a day. You are scheduled for a 2-hour time block. Each person that submits their abstract to your session will have, a 2-hour time block that they're at their poster for discussion. And then you as a convener can help schedule poster walks where you help people tour through the posters, and each presenter can give a short, maybe like 1 to 2 minute presentation on their poster. Virtually, what poster sessions will look like is each of the presenters in your session will have an iPoster made. This is our online format that AGU posters take. And then those presenters will also create a 2-hour time block or multiple time blocks to present their work, either a live chat function or a video function like a Zoom drop-in call. And then you as a convener of the virtual poster session can also set up poster walks where you jump from URL to URL and everybody can give a few minute talk about their poster. The next session that your the next format that your session can possibly take is e-lightning. This is a nice kind of mix in between oral and poster presentation. So in person, what this will look like is each presenter in your session will have a 3-minute talk on like a big screen behind them, where they bring up their iPoster on this giant screen. And then everyone will give their 3-minute talk and then go to their respective computers where they have their iPoster up on site, and then be able to walk people through their iPosters. Virtually, what e-lightning will probably look like is 3-minute live talks on their iPoster, where you bring it up and screen share on your virtual session. Everyone goes through their talk, and then there's about 20 minutes for discussion afterwards. And then separately on top of the e-lightning session, you can also choose to have a poster viewing for your own iPoster, either with a live chat or video format. So those are the 3 most likely formats that you as a session submitter will end up with. There's a couple additional formats that I'll just briefly touch upon. One is a panel format. This can be held in person or virtually. And this is where you have 6 mostly solicited speakers that you invite to submit, informally invite to submit an abstract to your session. These panel sessions are really a way to dive in a little bit deeper on one subject in particular, ask people with that expertise to submit an abstract to your panel, and then there can also be a supplemental poster session with that panel session. The panel format is just a little bit more flexible than an oral format. There's less speakers, and you can change around how long you would like each panelist to speak for, and leave room for a longer discussion period if you want to say discuss current topics and data availability of infectious diseases, or really dive into a particular subject, or get people's opinions on where the science is going in a certain field. And you, as the session submitter, will act as the moderator and really promote the discussion for that panel format. My personal recommendation, if it is your first time submitting a session, is to not choose to do a panel format. I would choose to choose one of the other formats, and I'll talk about how you actually choose that in the system later. Okay, so there's a couple special types of sessions, and again, I'm going to mention these, but I don't personally recommend these for a first-time submitter, only because they're a little bit more involved. There's union sessions, which are usually the interdisciplinary big topics of the year. And these are ones that if you go into the AGU program online, you wouldn't find them under GeoHealth, you would actually find them under the union kind of tag in AGU. And those are approved by AGU staff, not the GeoHealth committee. So those are kind of the focus of the fall meeting that are interdisciplinary topics. There's also special sessions. Last year they were called innovative sessions. And these can be a combination of all the other session types, or it's really your opportunity to kind of think out of the box and create any type of session that you want to. Maybe you want to mix a oral session with a certain discussion and then a workshop or something like that. But these are much more involved, there's more planning, and they're usually a longer time frame on the actual presentation day. So innovative sessions are also approved by AGU staff. They are not approved by the GeoHealth committee. Okay, so one caveat that comes to bite a lot of early career submitters for sessions, that there's this thing called the speaker rule. And I know this firsthand because I messed it up my first time submitting a session. So the rule is that you cannot give an oral presentation within a session that you are convening. This rule was put in place to discourage folks who almost wanted to like flag themselves in automatically as an oral talk at the AGU meeting. We recognize that sometimes it, comes back to hurt early career folks because they want to be able to convene a session and give a talk at the meeting. And since oftentimes those, session ideas are the topic of interest that we are also doing our research on, it can get a little frustrating. So here are the workarounds to this rule, is that you can convene a session on a particular topic and give an oral presentation in somebody else's session. So when you actually go to submit your scientific abstract come late July, you would not submit your scientific abstract to your own session. You can give a poster within your own oral session or within your own poster session. So if you submit a session and it ends up getting a few abstracts underneath the limit of being awarded an oral session, then you are still allowed to give a poster presentation within your own session. You also can give a 3-minute talk in an e-lightning session. However, you cannot be a panelist on your own panel. Really, your primary function when you are the session convener for a panel is to be the moderator who helps ask questions and guides the discussion for the panelists there. So just please keep the speaker rule in mind, because we do adhere to it here on the planning committee side. Okay, so number 2 is that there's roles that each person is going to take and roles that you need to select when you actually submit your session. So the first role is the primary convener. This is going to be the person that usually is the one that submits the session proposal and is going to kind of lead the effort. Then you need at least one other individual to be a convener of your session. There's also a primary liaison. This is the person who is going to be in direct contact with the fall meeting planning committee. You will be the one that receives emails from me or someone else on the GeoHealth committee if there's any sessions that we want to merge or any issues that come up with abstract scheduling later down the road. The primary convener and the primary liaison positions are both, required roles. When you go into the system, you have to choose those. And then up to 3 other individuals can be conveners on your session. So that leads 1 primary convener, 3 potential conveners. So 4 people max can be involved with 1 session proposal. The only catch to having all 4 people involved is that if something happens and you end up merging with another session later, so say we have 5 infectious disease sessions, we want to merge 2 of them, and we have 4 conveners for one of the sessions, 4 conveners on the other session. When we merge, we can still only have a max of 4 people. So then you'll just have to choose 4 people within those 8 to continue forward with the session. From my personal experience, I suggest having a primary convener and 1 to 2 other colleagues involved with the session submission. I've just found that that's a nice number to work with. You have some colleagues to bounce ideas off of and help you make any choices if you need to choose, you know, who is going to do an oral presentation versus poster, et cetera. But then if you do have to merge later on, it avoids some of the conflict with having too many individuals. And then later down the road, after submission and after your session is accepted, you will have to choose an outstanding student presentation award liaison that helps find the judges for your student presentations. And then you will choose who actually chairs your session. So as a convener, you are the person responsible for submitting the session and for choosing who speaks or who presents in what order at the session. And then the chairs of the session are the people who are literally going to sit, whether in person or virtually, at the session the day of. So just kind of a story to help you imagine what may happen here between conveners and chairs. I submitted a session last year with someone who was transitioning in their career. They unfortunately could not make it to fall meeting that year. So although they were a convener of the session and helped me plan the session, they were not a chair at AGU fall meeting because they couldn't show up. Okay. So after you pick your topic and after you find someone to be a convener and someone to fill the other roles, you actually go onto the system and you submit your session proposal. So if you are interested in doing a oral or poster or panel format, the thing you're going to look for on the left-hand side of the submission screen is submit a general scientific session. And then the things you actually have to put into the system are a title, a description, up to 150 words of your session, and then you choose your format. And for this general scientific session, your choices for format are 1, assigned by committee, so assigned by the GeoHealth committee, 2, a panel, or 3, poster only, meaning you do not want to be considered for an oral session or an e-lightning session. And so why you cannot actually choose to have an oral presentation is that the AGU staff do not know how many people are going to submit abstracts and submit sessions for the year. And so we don't know how many oral presentation slots each AGU section will be awarded each year. Usually the GeoHealth session has about 10 slots for oral scientific sessions. But again, it varies year to year depending on what the participation level of AGU is. So if you do want to be considered for an oral format, you would select assigned by committee. E-lightning, you would select assigned by committee. Panel, you would select panel. Poster only means you will get a poster session only. You will not be assigned oral or panel or anything else. Then you give a couple flags to your session to help people find it when they're actually going to submit your scientific abstract. You flag whether you want it to be cross-listed under another AGU section. So if I am going to submit a session on infectious diseases, in particular like waterborne diseases and flooding, maybe I want to have it, cross-listed with the hydrology section as well. And then you can also choose whether it's co-organized, and I'll get into both of these actually in the next slide, so I'm going to pass over this for now. You then are going to this year select whether you want a virtual only session. So if you know you're not going to be able to attend in person this year, you would select virtual only. Or if you want the potential to do a partial in-person session as well, you're going to select hybrid as your choice here. And then there's an area for comments, and I read all the comments. So if there's anything you want me to know, please do leave a comment. If you want to be considered for an e-lightning session, or potentially want to be considered for a panel down the road, and you just don't know, mention it there, and I can always get in touch with you later, and we can, work out the best format for your session. I promise, although it seems like you submit this thing into a black box, it doesn't go into a black box. We look at all of them, we read through all of them, and I read all the comments. So please use it if you'd like to. Okay, so these slides are going to be made available to you, and this is a flow chart that you can also find on the AGU website. But this is a helpful diagram for deciding about if you want to cross-list or co-organize your session. And so cross-listing is basically if your session is interdisciplinary, you want to flag a couple AGU sections that might be interested in, say, those waterborne diseases. I would go ahead and cross-list it under hydrology and GeoHealth, or you can select co-organizing. So co-organizing is if you have conveners of your session who are from different AGU sections, you can flag that too. So say my convener is from hydrology and I am from GeoHealth, I can call it a co-organized session. And then there's some other, there's a co-sponsored session, which is if you're polling from an outside agency, which again, I don't recommend that approach for your first time submitting a session proposal, but you can find information about co-sponsoring in the diagram. Okay, and then possibly the easiest part of submitting your session is you pick a few index terms so that people can actually find your session, and that us as committee organizers can help kind of mash sessions together. So you pick 4 index terms. You can pick them from any of the index terms listed. They don't have to be GeoHealth specific. They're just kind of your keywords that you would submit if you're submitting a manuscript. So you pick 4 that match closely to your topic. And just a note that GeoHealth has a few to choose from, and it does help if you choose some in GeoHealth, but again, you're not limited to GeoHealth. Okay, and then for diving into the convener duties a little bit more, I'm gonna touch upon what the convener does before fall meeting, and then Ben's actually gonna take over and talk about what happens as a convener or a chair at that point at fall meeting. So you submit your session by April 14th, and then it comes to the GeoHealth Fall Meeting Planning Committee, and we have to accept your session. If your session is appropriate and it's relevant, it will be accepted. I have never rejected a session. It's not something that typically happens. So long as it's appropriate and relevant to the topic, it will be accepted. And then before fall meeting, what you're in charge of as the convener is that you do get the power to invite 2 speakers to submit abstracts to your session. This is this is a, CV booster for those individuals who are invited to submit an abstract. And then for you as the convener, it's a great opportunity to think of diversity and inclusion and invite people to the table that you want to be there, and invite people that you want to network with and get to know. So you do get to invite two speakers. Before fall meeting, the convener may deal with potential session merges. Like I mentioned earlier, if we have many people that are looking at infectious diseases, we might try to merge those together to combine. You also identify which individuals have an oral versus poster presentation if your session is awarded an oral presentation. And then you schedule the order of presentations. And I've kind of alluded to this, but how the oral allotment works is that we have to see how many people submit abstracts to all of AGU and GeoHealth, and then there's essentially a moving threshold each year, where if your session has above X abstracts submitted, then you are eligible to have an oral time slot, if that's something that you chose in the system. So I am going to hand it over to Ben now to talk about what actually happens as a convener at fall meeting.
Great, thanks so much, Morgan. Really valuable information there. I learned a lot. It's always useful to review this process. There's a lot involved. I do want to emphasize, though, please don't be intimidated by the steps that Morgan laid out. It actually flows quite well. I think it's impressive, the system that AGU has put together once you enter it. And also, you have us to turn to on the GeoHealth Leadership Committee, the Fall Meeting Program Committee, and we're here to help because we really want to make the best of this program and really support folks who want to get sessions in there. And I agree with everything Morgan said. One point that I do want to maybe add a little twist on, though, is the union sessions. And I think that Morgan's right, that as a rule of thumb, it's not necessarily the best move for your very first submission. But I also don't want people to be intimidated away from union sessions. And it's another place where we can help. If you have an idea that you think should be a union session that's cross-cutting, that's a big topic, where you really feel it's important and have some ideas of the leading lights you want to convene to discuss it, by all means, go for it, or reach out to us and we'll help you go for it. Because when it comes to both the visibility of the sessions for the science, but also the networking opportunities. One of the first sessions I convened was a union session just after finishing graduate school. And it was a great opportunity because I met and then we did a press conference with it, and all these folks who I would not have met otherwise. And so, so if you're thinking about union sessions, I agree completely with Morgan. It's not the best way to just to dip your toe in, dip your toe in with a standard session usually. But if you think you've got a union idea, then please talk to us and we can figure out how to support that. So to the fall meeting, as Morgan has indicated, and as we all know, the fall meeting in the world in general is a moving target right now, right? So we aren't exactly sure what this is going to look like, who's going to be in a room, who's going to be in a Zoom room. But these, I think, generally apply. And that is that you're going to want to, for anything that's an oral session or an e-lightning session, or if they end up doing what they did last year with kind of compressed oral sessions with longer recorded talks, you'll provide opening remarks. And these are typically brief. They have to be brief because AGU runs a tight ship, right? The fall meeting is right on schedule, but you want to get a couple minutes to welcome people, set the tone. And it's a nice opportunity for you to get some stage time, of course, and let your speakers know who you are. And you will then introduce speakers as they come, which is the easy and fun part. Then there's the not so much fun part, which is having to cut speakers off when they go over time. And that no one loves that job, or maybe some people do, but I think most of us don't like that job. And so you do need to do that though, right? Because to be fair to all the speakers in the session and feel comfortable doing it, because though it can feel awkward, everyone appreciates the fact that you're doing this because you have to be fair to all the speakers. So that it can be a little uncomfortable in the abstract, but in reality, everyone knows how it goes. And then you're going to, if this is especially in a hybrid or virtual format, you will be reading out to the speakers any questions that have come in through the chat. even in a fully live environment, I would say it's important to have some questions in your back pocket. That's what, typical moderator rules, right? So you want to be able to make the session lively in case questions happen not to come in. But pretty standard how that works. And this is, again, as we get more information on the formats, I know that Morgan and the rest of the team are going to be communicating this to people across the section to understand exactly what might be happening in a hybrid session, to understand in terms of timing discussion, how questions are going to come in. But these general rules will apply no matter what the format is. So next slide, please. Yeah, and so here are a few issues that come up. And Morgan, were you going to talk to this, or do you want me to talk to it?
Either way, Ben, I think I kind of said maybe some of these things already.
You have said some.
Can you go back a slide? I think you may have skipped one accidentally.
I don't think I did. I've got convener duties at fall meeting, and then I went into types of.
Okay.
Yeah. That's okay. Maybe I'll just say a couple other things. I had thought there was another side at one point, but just a few points. Whether this is virtual or in person, especially if it's virtual in some ways. So what's a big motivation for doing this as an early career researcher is the networking, right? Is the opportunity to get to know people. Now, Morgan already mentioned you can invite people, so that's useful. But there are many other ways you can connect with people. And at first, when we went virtual, I thought, oh, that's too bad because it's not going to give the opportunity for session conveners to have that kind of networking. I think it's actually quite the opposite, in that there are a lot more opportunities. In the virtual world, it's going to be important for you to be in communication with anyone who's submitted to your session as we get towards the meeting. Everybody is confused, right? No one knows what this is going to look like. And so that's a responsibility, but an opportunity to reach out to people, get to know them, talk about how the session is going to be, guide them through, and doing people that kind of favor serves you well, right? Then when the meeting happens, obviously for live and in person, that's a great opportunity to get to know folks in your session. Absolutely, for a poster session, doing some kind of virtual poster walk, getting people together is really valuable for yourself as well as for the community of people who have submitted to the session. And then after the session, and this is absolutely optional, it's not a requirement, but it's a good opportunity to thank the speaker, maybe ask some follow-up questions, things like this, right? And that will give you another opportunity to kind of establish that rapport, that relationship. As a session convener, you are performing a service to the people who have submitted to your session. So you are in a position to be very well liked by people, right? You're in a position where you are making the meeting a success for them. And the more communication, the more engagement you give, the more that really can turn this into a relationship building experience. And people will remember that positively. I'm sure those of you who have participated as a speaker or a poster presenter and got real interaction from your convener probably remember that yourself, right? And so it's a great way to build community. So with that, maybe I will hand it back over to you, Morgan, for these points. This is really in your wheelhouse this year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. And it's so valuable to hear your take on it too. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to flag a couple issues that you might come across as the convener. These are not big issues at all. They're just things that since I've been through it before, I just know that these are the little speed bumps. Sometimes your session does get merged with another session, and we run into the issue of we have to select only 4 individuals to move forward as conveners of the session. Sometimes if there's a specific cutoff for the number of abstracts you need in order to be allotted an oral time slot, and you just have like 1 extra speaker and don't want to have 1 poster associated as a poster session with your set of like 8 oral presentations, I will work with you to adjust your schedule to make a 9 speaker oral session so that you don't have that 1 rogue poster. On rare occasions, this has broken the speaker rule, and that is on a very, very case-by-case basis that I work with AGU staff to flag it as okay. There, it is a moving target, and yeah, we don't know exactly what's going to happen this year, but I am here to work with you to make it a successful session. And then once in a very blue moon, you may have a rather strange abstract submitted to your sessions. So I just always recommend people do read through the abstracts that are submitted and make sure that everything is appropriate for your session. Sometimes the content is just inappropriate for your session, or like completely on a different topic. And then we can work as the organizing committee to just put it in a more appropriate spot. So since I've given you a rundown of kind of what happens with the session submissions, I won't go over everything here, but basically my job is to be your point of contact for the fall meeting, and in particular for GeoHealth. So I will be the one emailing you with any issues that come up, and I will myself and I work in a team of others as well. But we will be the ones that will help you, edit your session or add, cross listing if we think that it would make your session easier to find. And we also answer your any questions you have. There's 2 emails here. The top one is our official AGU email. Please email this email if you have any questions or any issues with submitting a session. And then if for some reason you don't get a response in a few days, please flag my UCI email as well and just forward the email to there. And then I try my best to accommodate people, especially since we're a small session. So if you have any suggestions or anything, just please reach out and chat. Let's see here, and a rogue slide. So Franziska, I think that's all I had.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Morgan, and thank you, Ben. And I do just really want to highlight that we have the expertise here in terms of AGU GeoHealth sessions. Ben is the president of the AGU GeoHealth section. We're just very thankful that he's joining us today. He also helped coordinate the very first GeoHealth section, or the first year that AGU had the GeoHealth section, and put together a meeting program. And Morgan has been on the meetings committee now several years. Morgan, how many years has it been? But 3? I feel like it's been a while, but they do a lot of coordinating on the backside. And I know that I submitted a session as a graduate student in the first year. And the reason I did that was really to go back to Morgan's point, because there was a topic that I was interested in that I hadn't felt was really represented at AGU in the prior years, and everyone else was going to AGU, and I wanted to submit my work and didn't find kind of a home for where I thought that would be. And so, submitting a session proposal is really a great way to have a space to talk about the topics that you're interested in, and to network, to meet other folks who are interested in that topic as well. So definitely encourage you all, if you're interested, to do that. I do want to check where you're at. 11:50 here on the Pacific Coast time zone. So I do want to transition us a little bit over to question and answers. We've had some great questions that came in, and we'll kind of have this conversation here with Morgan and Ben about some more advice and tips and tricks for submitting these proposals. Thank you, Morgan, for this great overview. This was really helpful. And I do want to pin or highlight again that this is a kind of a collaborative process, and that you can reach out to Morgan, or if you have ideas of union sessions, reach out to GeoHealth section, leadership, team members. We really do want to make this a great AGU session fall meeting with a lot of great GeoHealth sections. So there is, it's not just a black box you have to submit something to. I think that, what my first year, I wasn't aware of how collaborative and all the work as well that goes in on the back end. So thank you both for that. So I think the first question I want to bring up here is a question about the topic, of choosing the topic. And we've had a few questions come in here, And if you could speak a little bit to how do you know if your topic is broad enough or specific enough, and do you have to have, you know, an extensive research track record or have expertise to propose a session on a topic? So, you know, how broad, how narrow, how much does it have to fall into your wheelhouse? And yeah, and if you have any advice on kind of how to put that hook in your session proposal text.
I'll start and then I'll let Ben add in any information that I missed. So in terms of narrow versus broad, I think, you know, it's always kind of good to cast your net a little bit wider than you think, because you want, you ideally want people to submit abstracts to your session. And so if you make your session too specific and say, I would like to have a session on infectious diseases in North America in particular and policies surrounding these infectious diseases, then you can imagine that it's only going to maybe catch a few abstracts that really apply. But if you instead, you know, broaden your description and say, I'd like to talk about infectious diseases, and you don't give a, you know, geographical limit, you know, worldwide infectious diseases, as well as applications to policy, then you're going to get a few more, you know, abstracts potentially submitted to your session. So I would say cast your net a little bit wider, and you can always make little, you know, caveats in your description that says, like, we would like to, you know, focus on policy, but also we accept, you know, ideas surrounding community research or other things that helps people feel like they're allowed to submit their scientific abstract to your session. And then in terms of, Ben, do you want to cut in before I keep going here?
Sorry, no, I thought maybe you were done with that thought. Maybe now that I'm talking, I will talk. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, so I completely agreed. I would err on the side of being broad. I would also say this speaks to the broader challenge, I would say, for early career people submitting a session, which is you want to get a good number of abstracts. That's really vital when it's a live meeting and you want to get a lot of oral spots. Even in the virtual world, you want an energized session, right? So you want a lot of people. And so in addition to all the advice that Morgan just gave, I'd say there are a few other maybe tricks you can use to make your session stand out in a way that will attract abstracts. One is in your choice of language, right? If you can echo the kind of phrasing that maybe exists in particular funding calls. So like if you were talking about like an example where like NSF has that program on the food, energy, water nexus, right? If you put that kind of phrase into a session proposal, it will let people know who are working in that area that that's something that they might want to submit to. Similarly with any of the other programs we might talk about. Another trick I would say is that it's nice to convene with other people, and sometimes maybe you aren't that deeply networked at this stage in your career, but even if you can find some people, reach out to them. It's kind of fun, right? Like people, even if you don't know them that well, from a couple different institutions, so that then you're drawing on a broader base of connections that people will recognize those names, and also as you promote the session, you'll have a broader way to promote it. And that's the third point, which is promoting. And so many of you have already experienced this, right? Which is like they announce the AGU sessions and then you get a little bombarded in your inbox with everyone talking about their session. But you want to do that. You want to reach out via various networks, try to get people to submit their abstracts to the session, because Morgan and her team are then going to do that work of merging and combining and trying to do everything in the background. But you would love to go into that process with a really strong crop of abstracts already. Back to you, Morgan.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great advice. I just wanted to, Ben, you had talked earlier about promoting your session, and just wanted to highlight that as well, to really, you know, once you have your session, contact folks who you know their work might fit well and you'd love to know more about their work. It's a great networking strategy opportunity for you to meet them and have a reason to invite them and talk to them. And that was really helpful for me when I cold emailed a lot of people who I knew their work and was able to say, hey, I really admire your research. I think it would be a good fit for this session at AGU. So I think that's really useful. And the same for co-conveners, maybe find someone who's not at your institution, find someone, and ask someone. Again, it's a great opportunity to network with those folks, but also they have a wider network themselves to then broadcast and share about the session, and so that you can build on that, build on their network to get the word out and get more people to submit to your session.
And let me just reiterate what Franziska just said about cold emailing. Do it. And Morgan, sorry, I can't remember if you said this already, but the GeoHealth abstract is still an additional abstract, right? So, AGU has the one abstract rule for speakers, but GeoHealth they can do on top of another abstract. And so even if you aren't formally making them your invited speaker, if it's you're just soliciting a standard submission, a lot of people aren't aware of that. And that's a big benefit of saying, hey, why don't you submit to my session? You can do this on top of another abstract.
And I got a great email last year from someone doing an infectious disease session. And he said, hey, I'm doing this session. I see you've presented on infectious diseases before. I just want to let you know the session's going on. And I was like, wow, that was great. That was a nice networking opportunity.
Exactly. Great. So I have one question here, or we're almost running out of time here, but do want to throw this question out as well. I think that's important in terms of, do you have any advice in terms of the session planning process on how to improve diversity and inclusion in our sessions, picking co-conveners, inviting speakers, anything else? I know, Morgan, you mentioned that the invited speakers is a good opportunity for session conveners to think about diversity and inclusion. Would you mind elaborating a little bit, or do you have any other examples of successful sessions from the past?
Yeah, I think actually that example that I just shared where you solicit your session to folks, that's a great opportunity, especially to invite people globally to really reach out and let people know that the session's going on. So that's one great way to flag. And then I always encourage conveners to really think about DEI when they are choosing who gets an oral versus a poster presentation, and to just make sure that you are you're trying your best to have a variety of voices at the table. And something that you'll be able to see when you're doing that also is if they're a student or not. So, giving the students an opportunity to give an oral presentation as well as people who are not identified as students, I think is another great way.
Great, thank you. And with that, I realize that we are actually at time. We're at 12 p.m. here on the Pacific time zone. So I just want to take the time to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for the great questions that came in. I hope that we got to cover a lot of them throughout the presentation, and here at the end, we're going to look at making the recording available on AGU's and on the GeoHealth Connect page so that you can follow up. And we have some links here in the chat for where you can find more information about proposing an AGU session. And I just quickly wanted to plug that the GeoHealth Early Career webinar will continue, and we have monthly sessions, and so our next session will be on Friday, April 9th. Our sessions are Fridays, the second Friday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And thank you again, Morgan and Ben, so much for taking the time to join us today and share your experience and expertise for submitting a session.
Thank you all. I'm so excited to see your sessions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.